Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to The Deep Dive, where we take the insights you share with us and really try to break them down into something you can actually use.
A bit of a shortcut to understanding some pretty complex human experiences.
And today, we are sinking into one of the most, just incredibly moving and raw testimonials we have ever gotten. It's from a 72-year-old listener we're calling Norman.
It's an unbelievably powerful source. And not because of, the medical details. Norman shared his reflections after getting a stage 3 colon cancer diagnosis just 3 months ago.
Right. And what he gave us wasn't really a story about fighting a disease. It was more like this deeply honest inventory of his life.
A life review, yeah.
Great.
One that was forced on him by an unwanted deadline.
He painted this picture that I just can't get out of my head. He's in this cold, sterile doctor's office.
And the doctor's talking about survival rates, surgical options.
Yeah, and Norman said he was just staring at a poster on the wall showing the anatomy of the digestive system, of all things.
Yeah.
So detached.
And his first thought, his very first internal reaction, it wasn't panic. It wasn't anger.
No.
It was this strange, almost calm thought. He just thought to himself, so this is how my story ends.
Wow. It's like the shock just immediately cut through everything else. It became this brutally efficient editor for his life story.
Highlighting what really mattered and maybe more painfully what should have mattered.
So our mission for this deep dive is to analyze exactly that, how a clear ticking clock forces this brutal, honest assessment of a life spent prioritizing, say, stability over real passion.
And the goal is to pull out a framework from Norman's experience so that you, listening right now, can start that journey from just existing to actively living.
Without having to wait for a crisis to force your hand, that's the key. The wisdom has to be transferable.
Okay, so to really get the shift he went through, we have to look at the timeline. Because he points out that it wasn't immediate. There was a delay.
The first week, he said, was not philosophical at all. It was just pure logistics.
He called it survival mode.
Exactly. It's a checklist, right? Tell a family, schedule the scans, figure out the insurance.
Researching treatment options. He said he was just running on adrenaline and autopilot. He was dealing with the external disease, not the internal reality.
But then came the second week.
And that's where the emotional catalyst hits. He woke up early one morning. He looked over at his wife sleeping. This woman he'd been with for nearly 50 years. And he just started to cry, uncontrollably.
And he's crystal clear about this. The tears were not about a fear of dying.
No. He realized he wasn't crying for the future he might lose. He was crying for the past he felt he had already misspent.
That's just staggering.
It is. He said in that moment he saw his entire adult life, all 38 years of it, laid out in front of me like a map.
And from that vantage point, he could see every single wrong turn.
Exactly. He saw that the stability he'd worked so hard to build was kind of built on a foundation of quiet compliance. And the cost of that was his authentic self.
Which brings us right to his career, his professional life.
Yeah.
He spent 38 years as an accountant. And, by any societal metric, financial security, providing for his family, retiring with a good pension, he was a huge success. He did everything right.
But the diagnosis completely shattered that definition of right.
He finally said the words out loud that he'd been holding in for decades. I hated it.
And it wasn't just indifference. It was an active loathing of the work. He gave specifics, didn't there?
Oh, yeah. The humming fluorescent lights, the endless spreadsheets, those performance reviews where you're basically negotiating your soul for a tiny raise.
The suffocating office politics, the kind that just drain your emotional energy for absolutely no reward.
He had this amazing line. He said it was a life spent calculating other people's value, but he never had the time to calculate his own. It was a grind.
It was a grind because the work was just fundamentally mismatched with who he was. He traded his passion for reliability.
And that passion, it's the contrast that makes it so sharp. His true calling was woodworking.
His grandfather taught him.
Wow.
A cabinet maker. They built an oak bookshelf together when Norman was just 12.
And he still has it. It's in his den right now. A physical reminder of the road not taken.
So what happened? Why the detour?
His father. When he was in college, his dad told him woodworking was a nice hobby, but accounting was practical.
Recession-proof.
And Norman admitted his father was right. It was practical. It gave them a stable life. But then he wrote this heartbreaking line. It just wasn't mine.
It was a good life, but it belonged to my father's expectations, not my own.
And the regrets that haunt him. They're not these big dramatic failures.
No, nothing like that. He calls them the quiet regrets. It's the cumulative weight of thousands of tiny compromises.
And these are the ones that hit you right where you live, you know? He wasn't regretting some huge mistake. He was regretting all the little suppressions of joy.
Like skipping a dinner party with friends because he was too tired from work.
Even though he knew those connections were what actually energized him. Or putting off a weekend trip with his wife to save a little money.
Only to realize decades later that he valued the money he saved more than the memories he never made.
Yeah, and constantly telling his kids, maybe later, when they wanted to play catch, he always chose the safe, practical, responsible option.
Which he now calls the existing option over the living option.
The big takeaway there is just, you don't need a catastrophe to have deep regret. You just need 1,000 small compromises over decades.
And the diagnosis completely strips away that illusion of later.
So he gets this clarity. He knows the past was defined by these quiet regrets. How does he define his future?
Well, he agrees to the aggressive treatment plan, the chemo, the surgery. But, and this is crucial, he decides that reclaiming his life is a necessary co-treatment.
He doesn't wait. He goes right into his garage, which he said had become this tomb for 20 years of junk and deferred dreams.
And he clears it all out, a very tangible act of letting go. He sets up a proper workshop and buys good tools. He starts working with wood again for the first time in decades.
He's physically reclaiming that identity, the one he suppressed when he was 20 years old.
Deciding that if his time is short, then every single minute has to reflect who he actually is.
I love the paradox of energy he talks about, because logically he shouldn't have any. The chemo makes him exhausted, his hands shake.
But an hour or two in that workshop, he says, makes him feel more alive than he has in the last 2 decades.
That's purpose. That's what that feels like.
Yeah. He just finished a walnut jewelry box for his granddaughter, maple inlays. He said it wasn't perfect. The lines were a little off because of the shaking.
But he doesn't see that as a flaw.
No. He sees it as evidence of his current human condition. It's real. It was made with love, not for a deadline.
And this leads to maybe the most painful moment in his notes, this intergenerational lesson.
His son comes to visit. He's 27, works in insurance, kind of following in Norman's practical footsteps.
Norman's showing him how to use a wood chisel, and his son watches him for a bit and then just says,
"Dad, I didn't know you could do this. I wish you taught me when I was a kid."
Ugh. Can you imagine hearing that? Norman realized that by being too busy being responsible, he hadn't just denied himself. He denied his own kids the chance to know his true self.
He had kept the most vital parts of himself locked away.
So all of this crisis, it forces a complete revolution in how he thinks about time.
It leads to what he calls his great philosophical realization. We're all terminal, every single one of us.
Which sounds morbid, but he says it isn't.
Not at all. He finds it liberating. Because when you truly accept that, you realize that every single choice you make today matters. Absolutely.
That's the key distinction. It's liberating because you can stop pushing your happiness off to some mythical retirement date that might never come. The time is always now.
And this clarity, it allowed him to just cut out the noise.
Yeah.
Instantly.
He lists the things he just stopped caring about. He doesn't argue politics with his brother-in-law anymore.
Doesn't check the stock market obsessively. Genuinely doesn't care if his neighbor's lawn looks better than his.
He calls them the great distractions. They're the things we do when we think we have an infinite supply of time to waste.
But when that clock starts ticking loudly, all that superficial stress just evaporates.
So what fills that space?
Intentional living. Small, high-quality human moments. He has long conversations with his wife where they actually listen to each other.
Deep listening. Something that wasn't possible when he was distracted by work.
He calls his kids just to hear their voices, not to give advice. He's just present.
And he's teaching his granddaughter how to sand wood. Not just the motion, but how to feel the grain, how to be patient.
These small, tactile human moments are his new currency.
Which brings us to the most powerful image he shared. He calls it the chemo clarity.
Yeah. About 2 hours into a chemo session, when the drugs really hit, that metallic taste, the body feels heavy, he notices what he doesn't think about.
He's not thinking about his career or his retirement accounts. None of the things he spent 4 decades worrying about even make the cut.
So what survives that mental filter?
The essential stuff. He thinks about his wife's specific laugh, the smell of sawdust, the feeling of his daughter falling asleep on his shoulder on a long car ride years ago.
And that's it.
That's it. He summed it all up in 4 words. Everything else is just noise. That's the wisdom he earned.
So for you, listening, it's easy to hear this and think, well, I can't just quit my job and become a woodworker. But that's not really the point.
Right. The core takeaway isn't about some huge financial upheaval. It's about looking at your life right now as it is and asking that hard question, am I living or am I just existing?
The difference between making a living and making a life is just injecting intention into your daily routines.
Norman's woodworking was just his way of reclaiming that intention. He started a new project, a hand-carved chess set for his son, the Saturday after his last chemo session.
It's not about finishing it. It's about showing up every day for the things that make you feel human.
He's finally taking his grandfather's advice, wisdom he didn't understand until now. At the end of your life, nobody's going to care how clean you kept your desk.
You don't need a diagnosis to give you permission to live the life you want. The permission is already yours. The only question is whether you'll finally use it.
And for you, the learner, for anyone looking to get these insights without the crisis, Norman actually recommended 3 specific books that he said changed how he thinks about time and purpose.
He recommended When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi.
Which is about a young doctor facing his own end.
The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware, which is from a hospice nurse's perspective. And Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, about finding purpose in the absolute worst circumstances.
They're all roadmaps for building a life of meaning. The kind of roadmap Norman wishes he'd had 50 years ago. A good place to start.